On October 25, 1942, the jungle south of Henderson Field on Guadalcanal was so dark that Gunnery Sergeant John Basilone could not see the man standing 3 feet to his left. He could hear him. Every Marine on that ridge could hear what was coming. The ground was shaking. Basilone was 25 years old, born in Buffalo, New York, to Italian immigrant parents, the 6th of 10 children. He had grown up in Rewritten, New Jersey, dropped out of school at 15, and worked as a caddy at the local golf club before enlisting in the Army in 1934. 3 years in the Philippines, discharged, civilian life. Then, in June 1940, he enlisted again, this time in the Marines. He was not a mechanic or a toolmaker. He was not an engineer. But on the night of October 24, 1942, with thousands of Japanese soldiers pressing through the jungle toward the single airfield that could decide the entire Pacific campaign, John Basilone would do something with a broken machine gun and a length of salvaged wire that military historians still argue about 80 years later. To understand what happened at Lunga Ridge, you have to understand what Henderson Field meant. Henderson Field was the only functional airstrip in the southern Solomon Islands. American aircraft operating from that strip could intercept Japanese supply convoys, protect Allied shipping lanes, and project air power across the entire lower Pacific. The Japanese High Command had decided, at the highest levels of command, that the airfield had to be retaken. They sent Major General Maruyama and 17,000 soldiers to do it. The Marines defending the perimeter numbered fewer than 3,000. The Marine defensive line south of the airfield was a series of interconnected fighting positions strung through the jungle and across a series of low ridges. The position Basilone's platoon held was critical. It sat directly astride the most logical avenue of approach from the south. His unit was 1st Battalion, 7th Marines. His weapons section operated 2 M1917A1 water-cooled heavy machine guns. The M1917A1 was a reliable weapon. It fired .30 caliber ammunition at roughly 450 rounds per minute. It was heavy. The gun body alone weighed 32 pounds. The tripod added another 53. The water jacket that kept the barrel cool added more weight still. You did not run with this weapon. You planted it, aimed it, and hoped the enemy came to you. That night, the enemy came to everyone. The attack began just after midnight on October 25th. The Japanese commander, Colonel Masajiro Furumiya, led his regiment through the jungle along a route his scouts had identified as lightly defended. What his scouts had not identified was that the Marines had spent 2 weeks improving their fighting positions, pre-registering fields of fire, and linking their machine gun sections into an interlocking network. When the first wave of Japanese soldiers emerged from the tree line, they walked directly into that network. Basilone's 2 guns opened fire. For 11 minutes, the attack stalled. Then a runner arrived at Basilone's position. The news was bad. The gun section on his right flank, the position that prevented the enemy from rolling up the entire defensive line, had gone silent. Basilone left his position. This requires explanation. Machine gun sections are force multipliers. They exist to dominate ground from fixed positions. A gunner who abandons his gun to investigate a problem on the flank is trading the certainty of his own position's firepower for the uncertainty of what he might find somewhere else. Basilone understood the mathematics. He went anyway. What he found when he reached the right flank position was not what he expected. The gun was not destroyed. The crew was not dead. The weapon had jammed. A feed tray malfunction combined with a ruptured water jacket that had drained the coolant system dry. Without water in the jacket, the barrel would overheat and the weapon would become inoperable within seconds of firing. Without a functioning feed tray, it could not fire at all. The Japanese were 50 yards away. Basilone had not been trained as an armorer, but he had spent 8 years working around military machine guns, first in the Army, then the Marines. He knew the M1917 the way a mechanic knows an engine, not from a manual, but from 10,000 repetitions. He cleared the feed tray with his hands, in the dark, under fire. The jam was a double feed, the most common malfunction of the type. 2 rounds trying to enter the chamber simultaneously, locking the bolt in a partially open position. He stripped the weapon down to its key components, cleared the jam by touch, and reassembled. The water jacket was a different problem. Without coolant, the barrel would overheat. A dry-fired M1917, operating at sustained rates, could warp a barrel in under 2 minutes. The barrel was not replaceable in the field. If it warped, the gun was finished. Basilone looked around the position. He found a length of rubber hose that had been used to refill the water jacket from a jerry can during the previous day's defensive preparations. The jerry can was empty. The nearby stream was 40 yards away, through open ground currently occupied by several thousand Japanese soldiers. He used the only liquid available. Marine veterans who spoke about this moment in later decades were consistently reluctant to describe it in polite company. John Basilone and 2 of his surviving Marines urinated into the water jacket of the M1917A1 to restore enough coolant to make the weapon operable. It worked. Urine is approximately 95% water. The mineral content affects long-term corrosion, but it has no meaningful effect on short-term heat transfer. As a field expedient for a water-cooled weapon with an empty jacket, it is thermodynamically sound. The gun fired. What happened over the next several hours has been described in Marine Corps historical records, survivor accounts, and in the Medal of Honor citation that would be issued in the name of Gunnery Sergeant John Basilone in 1943. The position held. Basilone moved between his 2 gun positions throughout the night, carrying ammunition through terrain where Japanese soldiers were physically present between the emplacements. He repaired a second weapon malfunction. He personally engaged enemy soldiers at close range when they breached the wire directly in front of his position. He directed the fire of his surviving gunners against successive waves of attackers. By dawn on October 25th, the ridge south of Henderson Field remained in Marine hands. The cost was catastrophic on both sides. Furumiya's regiment had lost over 900 men in a single night. The Marine positions had taken significant casualties of their own, but the airfield was intact. The number that appears most frequently in historical accounts is 38. That is the number of Japanese soldiers confirmed killed in the immediate area directly in front of Basilone's 2-gun position. This figure comes from the post-battle physical count conducted by Marine units the following morning. It does not include soldiers killed in adjacent sectors by fire from his position, nor those killed or wounded during his movement between the emplacements. Other figures in the historical record are harder to verify. The Marine Corps after-action reports, which are available at the National Archives, describe his actions across that night in summary terms, rather than with the granular specificity of a stopwatch account. What is not disputed is the outcome. The position held. The airfield survived. The campaign continued. On May 24, 1943, President Franklin Roosevelt presented Gunnery Sergeant John Basilone with the Medal of Honor at a ceremony in Washington. Basilone was 26 years old. He was one of only 2 enlisted Marines to receive the Medal of Honor during the Second World War. The citation described him as having fought for 2 days and nights, carrying ammunition through terrain under direct enemy fire, repairing weapons while under attack, and holding a position that would have collapsed without his actions. The Marine Corps immediately recognized what they had. They sent him home. The war bond tours of 1943 and 1944 were carefully managed promotional operations. Decorated combat veterans traveled city to city, attended rallies, gave speeches, and encouraged civilian purchase of war bonds that funded the ongoing conflict. The mathematics of it were deliberate. One hero on a stage in Chicago was worth more in bond sales than almost any other investment the government could make. Basilone was extraordinarily good at it. He was personable, direct, and genuinely uncomfortable with the attention, which paradoxically made people trust him more. He raised millions. He hated every minute of it. In the letters Basilone wrote to his family during the bond tour period, some of which have been preserved and donated to historical archives, a consistent theme emerges. He wanted to go back. The reasons he gave shifted depending on who he was writing to. To his brothers, he wrote about the men still fighting. To his mother, he wrote about unfinished work. In a letter to a fellow Marine that survived in a private collection, he wrote something closer to the truth. He did not know how to be at peace. In December 1943, Basilone formally requested reassignment to combat duty. The request was denied. He requested again. It was denied again. In early 1944, he was offered a commission, a promotion to officer rank that would have kept him stateside in a training role. He turned it down. He kept requesting combat reassignment until the Marine Corps relented. On February 19, 1945, Basilone landed on Iwo Jima with the 5th Marine Division. He was assigned to Dog Company, 1st Battalion, 27th Marines. His rank was gunnery sergeant. He was 28 years old. He had been married for 4 months to Lena Rigi, a Marine Corps sergeant he had met during the bond tour circuit. The beach at Iwo Jima was unlike any terrain the Marine Corps had assaulted. Black volcanic ash, no cover. The island's defenders had spent years constructing one of the most sophisticated underground fortification networks in military history. Miles of tunnels connecting hundreds of reinforced positions. The Marines came ashore into a killing ground. Within minutes of landing, the assault had stalled. Tanks were immobilized in the soft volcanic sand. Landing craft were destroyed at the waterline. Mortar and machine gun fire from concealed positions covered every inch of the beach. Basilone did not wait for orders. He moved along the beach, rallying pinned Marines, identifying the positions that were suppressing the advance. He guided a tank through a minefield, physically leading it on foot, pointing out mines by their slight surface disturbance in the ash, to a position where it could engage the fortifications directly. Then he moved forward, into the fire, toward a blockhouse that had stopped the advance of his entire section. The blockhouse was a reinforced concrete structure built into the terrain. Its walls were designed to deflect direct artillery fire. Its firing ports covered the approach from the beach. Standard assault doctrine called for tanks and demolitions working in coordination, a process that would take time. The Marines pinned on the beach did not have. Basilone reached the position. The specific sequence of what happened next comes from survivor accounts given in the weeks following. A small group of Marines followed him. He led them around to the less defended rear approach of the structure. They destroyed the position with grenades and demolition charges. The beach behind them began to move again. At approximately 1100 hours, on February 19th, 1945, while moving to assist another Marine position that was under fire, Gunnery Sergeant John Basilone was killed by a mortar round. He was 28 years old. He had been on Iwo Jima for less than 2 hours. He is buried at Arlington National Cemetery, Section 12, Site 384. The Marine Corps posthumously awarded Basilone the Navy Cross for his actions on February 19, 1945. The citation described his leadership on the beach, his navigation of the tank through the minefield, and the assault on the blockhouse. He had already received the Medal of Honor. The Navy Cross placed him in a company of 1, the only Marine enlisted man in the Second World War to receive both decorations. The city of Rewritten, New Jersey, where he had grown up caddying at a golf club and dreaming of something larger, renamed its main street in his honor. A monument still stands there today. Military historians return to the night of October 24th, 25th, 1942, for a specific reason. It was not the largest battle in the Pacific. It was not the most complex operation. It did not involve novel tactics or new technology. What it involved was one man, in the dark, with 2 broken machine guns, a rubber hose, and the absolute refusal to accept that the situation was beyond repair. The improvisation he performed that night clearing a jammed weapon by touch in darkness and heat, restoring cooling function with the only liquid available, is taught in Marine Corps small unit leadership training as an example of problem solving under conditions of maximum stress. Not because the solution was sophisticated, because the decision to solve it, rather than abandon it, was. There is a tendency, when telling stories like this one, to locate the heroism in the dramatic moments. The charge across open ground, the position that held against impossible odds, the posthumous medal. But the thing John Basilone did that no one disputes, the thing that the 2 broken guns and the improvised coolant and the hours of movement between positions all have in common, was simpler than any of it. He treated each problem as solvable. When the gun jammed, he fixed the gun. When the coolant ran out, he found coolant. When the position on his flank went silent, he went to it. He did not wait for conditions to improve. He treated the conditions in front of him as the conditions he was working with. A caddy from New Jersey who had dropped out of school at 15, working on a broken machine gun in a jungle, in the dark, with the enemy 50 yards away, and the entire Pacific campaign hinging on whether he could get it to fire. He got it to fire. If this story stayed with you, hit the subscribe button. We tell stories like this one every week. The forgotten moments, the ordinary people in extraordinary circumstances, the decisions that history turned on. Leave a comment and tell us where you're watching from. These stories belong to all of us.